OnSideRadio.com anywhere by downloading the MyTuner Radio app in your app store. Or go to MyTunerRadio.com on your web browser. OnSideRadio.com. South Florida sports leader. It's time to rack it up. Oh my God! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program. Inside the Paint is brought to you by Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack?
Yeah, hell yes!
Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint show.
Are you ready?
All right, welcome into Inside the Paint, our maiden voyage as a 1-hour program here on Mondays. We're going to be coming to you every Monday from 10 to 11 from the stadium here on OnSideRadio.com. As we just heard, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah, 305-424-8547. Ethan Skolnick, you can follow me at 5 Reasons Sports or at Ethan J. Skolnick. Ira Winderman, you can follow him, of course, at Ira Heatbeat. Good win for the Heat last night. A little bit surprising win in a lot of the ways that they got it. But let's start here. I think everybody wants to know the latest with Victor Oladipo. You and I have both been in this game for a long time, and there's a lot of times where you know a little bit more than you can absolutely say at a moment. I've kind of said what I was going to say yesterday. I know you've done some reporting as well. In your view, where does it stand right now?
You know, Ethan, the number one thing people have asked me over the weekend is, what is Victor Oladipo's injury? Mm-hmm. And I've had to tell them there is no specific quote-unquote injury. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you it's an MCL, an ACL, a quad tear, a quad strain, or anything. What it is pain. And sometimes that's even tougher, Ethan, when you don't know what specifically it is, but you still feel the discomfort as far as how you go ahead with the course of treatment. That's why we're stuck in neutral right now. Because right now, Victor Oladipo is trying to find out, what do I do to handle this pain? Mm-hmm. How much or how little do I need to do? And Ethan, you know this, especially you've covered so much football also, but you also covered Tim Hardaway with us back in the day with his knee and not having the cartilage and all that is, at some point, a player has to mentally accept there's going to be discomforts, there's going to be those uh-oh moments, but it's not going to lead to anything major. Right. So what Victor Oladipo is trying to confirm right now is, if he were to come back to play, whatever, without any other solution, would it create any further problems? Can he wrap his head around that there might be explosive moments followed by moments of uncertainty? Mm-hmm. And where does he go from there? The difference in this situation versus players playing through pain is he's an impending free agent who I would say, Ethan, for the last 2 years has done everything geared toward this moment of being an unrestricted free agent in his late 20s with his one chance for his final free agent contract. The question is, as much as you and I have discussed his medical solutions, I think also is his financial solutions. And I'm even going to get into some numbers during this segment with you as to what he might expect or want to expect. But that's the problem. I think if Victor Oladipo was under a long-term contract, he would find a way to push through, play a little, maybe not play a little, skip back-to-backs, play one game, skip another game, number one. I think if Victor Oladipo wasn't expecting a huge payday and was in his 30s or mid-30s, he'd say, you know what, I only have so much time left. I'm going to play through this. This is a playable injury. Mm-hmm. He probably couldn't have come back from a mental standpoint and pain standpoint when he went out on Thursday, but I think he could have played on this trip. He would have been in discomfort. He would not have been explosive Victor Oladipo, but I think he could have been helpful Victor Oladipo. And this is the story that Dave Hyde always tells about Pat Riley. When he had a player in the locker room in New York and he said, Coach, I can't go. And he said, if I needed you for one play to dive on one loose ball, and could I count on you for that? He goes, well, I guess I could do that. And then Pat said, then get your ass in uniform and get out there on the court and go play. Right. So that's the thing is, Victor Oladipo could play NBA basketball right now. Victor Oladipo does not have a specific injury we can say we are reporting he has this. Now, maybe a specialist finds that. Right. But at the moment right now, it's, I don't want to say almost as mental, but part mental, part physical.
Well, there's another element to this, as you mentioned, and the free agent part, but also the fact that he's trying to impress a particular team that he's dealing with right now. So this is not just the normal situation. Not that these things are ever normal, but the normal situation where you're going to be a free agent and you're going to have a big market of teams that you may look at. Victor Oladipo has basically selected the team he wants to play for. He's now working with those doctors. He's working with those coaches. He's working with those executives. And that, to me, complicates further because if you're Vic, like, you don't want to seem soft to a team that you want to pay you in the offseason so that you can actually stay here. And to me, that adds another element. You mentioned the Hardaway situation, and you and I both know that one very well. It also was the Dwayne Wade situation. I mean, there was basically a 2-year period where Dwayne was essentially playing with a bone bruise, right, that never really healed. They tried all kinds of different therapies on it, as you know. He went through different trainers. He left Grover. He went to David Alexander, etc. And it was basically described by the team as mostly a pain management issue. Now, they decided to manage that essentially by, they don't like to use the term, load managing,
Right,
Dwayne.
I was going to just say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if in this case, load management is even really an option with Vic. I mean, we were already maybe talking about them Goron, which is something we're going to talk about later in the program. But I don't even know if that's an option. But where it is right now, and just to, again, so everybody kind of understands it, because I think you and I are on the same page here with the reporting. The MRI did not show anything new, definitive, and scary, okay? At least, and again, MRIs are not always definitive, okay? Sometimes
you don't see anything. It's how you feel. It's
Exactly.
your willingness for surgery. It's you could go in with the scope.
Mm-hmm.
There is scar tissue involved here.
Yes.
So it could be something as simple as a piece of scar tissue got in the wrong place, rubbed against something, he felt it. You can go in there. You can get that shaved down. Might help, might not help. There are some players, go for the surgery. There are other players, you ain't sticking anything in my body. I got this. I'm going to push through it.
And there's a lot of elements with the leg because there was the quad injury, which was described to me as worse than the average, catastrophic knee injury. You're talking about 2 years. He's even acknowledged, I remember you tweeting that out the other day, that he has a strength deficit in that leg. I heard that the Houston trainers, they got in a lot of trouble there in Houston because they cleared him on some things that essentially they probably shouldn't have cleared him on prior to the trade. And so, I've also heard that there's a shin issue that's involved at this point. Because again, when you're talking about I've had knee surgery, okay? You're talking about everything gets compromised at some point, okay?
It's like that, the quad's connected to the knee bone, the knee bone's connected to the calf. We've seen it all the time.
Right.
It starts as one thing, it's another. To the point, I've gotten injury reports from the Heat. They go, oh, no, we meant it was that instead because it's basically...
think of the Winslow situation.
Right, it's just the poo-poo platter of injuries. Why do we go to list today?
So the question becomes this, okay? Here's the questions that fans have, so let's try to answer them as best we can, okay? Number one, is Victor Oladipo going to play again this season? My answer to that is he doesn't know and the team doesn't know. Are we on the same page on that?
We are, and it's funny because when I was talking to Kai on Friday, I downplayed the injury because there is an injury that can be downplayed. But part two of that, and people sort of ran with my comments, is I still don't know how long or how little he's going to miss because I think at the end of the day, that's purely his decision.
Right.
And it's not a matter of being soft. It's a matter of being cautious. It's a matter of having this contract. It's a matter of, and you know this, the Heat cannot tell Vic, look, if you don't play again, we're going to offer you X amount of dollars and move forward. You can't do that. Even your own free agent, you can't come to a wink-wink tacit agreement. Vic is not in positions salary-wise, contract-wise, where you can do an extension that'll meet his needs at the time. You have to wait till the offseason. That's where the uncertainty is. There's all these arcane cap rules where you can't say, you know what, we're going to cover you with X amount of money going forward. Right now, Victor Oladipo does not make another penny if he has a season-ending injury in his career. And there's no way for someone to cover him for that. That's the problem.
Right, and no insurance policy. There's nothing you can do about that. All right, and the number two thing here is, if you're the Heat, what is in your interest at this stage? In other words, is it in your interest because you're making a playoff push to try to get Vic back out there, okay, maybe nudge him along a little bit, or is it in your interest to protect a potential asset that you may want to keep down the road? Which direction do you move in? Because again, we dealt with this with Winslow, we've dealt with this with Bosch, there's so many examples over the years where sometimes everybody assumes it's the Heat pushing somebody to play. We know in the Bosch case it wasn't, in the Winslow case it was, right? So all of these situations are a little bit different.
Except he's such a big part of the next step for the Heat. That's the problem. And because of that he's part of the next step, Ethan, you have to ask question number 2. And again, I'm going to sort of put you on the spot here. I'm glad you have your phone there. You could look this up or not.
Yes.
I really don't have an answer.
I'm just retweeting something Orlando told me.
No. What I'm saying is it's something I don't have the list in front of me, but
Right.
if you don't re-sign Victor Oladipo, you will wind up with as much as 28, but more realistically, a little bit less than that. Who's plan B? And I was speaking to someone about this yesterday, and I was saying the one thing Vic showed me, and even only 4 games, he's the type of speed guard the Heat doesn't have now, the type of speed guard they had in Goran Dragic until Goran got older,
Right.
and you really saw how it changed this team
Yeah.
when he was on the floor. So you look at this summer's list of free agents. There's not really a quality speed guard out there.
No.
So if the Heat wants to get that yin and yang between Jimmy, perfect half-court offense, this team being last in pace and having someone quicker, you say to yourself, is Victor Oladipo at 90%? Or 80%, or 70% still the best speed guard we can wind up with after free agency?
Because Kyle Lowry's not that anymore.
Right, he was 36 also, yeah.
Right.
And you have issues there. So I think there's not a really good plan B for the Heat if that's where they want to go with their money, that I think they can make it work with Vic and then might say, you know what, let's pick this up when you really feel fully confident, when you have a full year with our doctors, a full year with our therapists, a full year down here training with your own people, and maybe move in that direction.
All right, when we come back, we will get into what happened last night. Very good win for the Heat last night, and in some ways, a little bit unexpected the way that they did it. But before we try to close the loop on this,
Actually,
go ahead.
You know what? I want to put you on the spot again because it's always more fun by asking the question first. So,
Okay.
let's do this. I think we all agree that Victor Oladipo, if it was non-bird rights, was probably looking at a $100 million deal, 4 years or so. The maximum for his age group
Maybe
is about
$25 million.
is about $30 million.
Okay.
So my point being on that is that's what he was looking at. And I actually had the temerity to write him. I asked Ira at sunsentinel.com, after this situation, there's no way he could be viewed as a max player. So, Ethan, congratulations. You become Andy Ellisberg. So I got you sitting over there.
I can't hold his calculator, but that's all right.
I got you over there with
Okay.
whatever you want to deal with. What would be, in your view, and I'll give you my view and then someone I spoke to, a fair Victor Oladipo contract in light of this situation?
I would say 2 years plus a team option at 15 per.
Okay. And I offered someone up the idea of 3 years, and I'll explain the third year, up to $20 million a year, which is still a $10 million haircut from what he thought he was going to get.
I'm saying 15, but go ahead.
And then the third year becomes guaranteed based on games played in the first 2 years.
Okay.
120 total games or in excess of 60 in any of the one seasons, however you want to break that down. So you cover yourself. That takes you through the end of Jimmy Butler's contract. So then you compare this older guards, not oldest, but older
Right.
guards, if Jimmy doesn't get the extension, just what Jimmy has on the table right now, and move forward. And I think that's so far off what Vic's people are expecting.
But you mentioned Vic's people.
Right.
That's a huge part of the problem here. Because anybody you talk to about Oladipo talks about Vic's people. And I think that is something that's going to scare the Heat off here, because I think part of it is that what I've been told basically happened in Indiana and happened in Houston, and that Vic has gotten a lot of bad advice. That he's been
changed agents once.
Right, he's changed agents once. It's all been sunshines and rainbows, okay? Sunshine and rainbows, and that is a part of the issue. And you know with the Heat, look, they dealt with LeBron's quote-unquote entourage because he was LeBron. When the Kawhi thing came up, they had concerns about the Kawhi thing, even though they went in for Kawhi, but they had issues about it, dealing with Kawhi's uncle. I know there are issues with Oladipo's people. The people around him, there's too many voices in his ear, and some of them are not giving him great advice. And I think that's going to be a complicating factor here.
And so the fact is, Ethan, if the Heat go to $20 million a year for the first 2 years, maybe a partial guarantee in the third based on game plays, and you can sort of, that becomes vested as you go along. More games played, more money we throw into that third year. Who else is giving Victor Oladipo $20 million a year besides the Knicks?
That's why there was no market.
Right. So it only takes one team that has money and nowhere to spend it, and you don't know. So I think if the Heat can almost tacitly say, this is what we're thinking. Does this work for you? If this works for you, we'll pick this up next season. Already in progress at a number that works for all of us.
I mean, if you're the Knicks, to me, it's DeMar. It's not Vic, right? Doesn't that make more sense?
It does, but they're the Knicks, and I know they've changed with Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau, but until the Knicks fully make sense.
Tom Thibodeau appreciates availability.
Right.
This is not a player who's consistently available. All right, you're here home for sports talk in South Florida, local sports talk, as you can hear on OnSideRadio.com. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
I'm Ryan Seacrest. First responders are people who stand for a greater purpose. They will be there for you when nobody else is, to help you, your family, your community. This is their selfless promise. This is their sworn duty to protect, to serve, to help. They put themselves in harm's way for us. They come to the rescue at times when we need them most. First responders are making enormous personal sacrifices to keep showing up for us and fighting the good fight. Nearly 70% of all firefighters are volunteers. That means when they get injured or quarantined, they may not have a way to pay their rent or keep their family safe and fed. No matter who you are or where you live, when you call 911 and ask for help, first responders show up. Now, let's show up for the people who show up for us every day and every night.
Go to firstrcf.org and make a difference today.
Inter Miami CF, your official furniture and mattress store, is here. City Furniture is your #1 home source for the trends you want at the prices you'll love, including exclusive City Furniture collections, the widest selection of styles, affordable home accents, mattresses starting at just $99 and more. Create the home of your dreams fast with next-day delivery, plus get 60 months special financing with no down payment. Because City Furniture is here to make it easy so everyone can live life like this, visit cityfurniture.com.
You're listening to the only sports station in South Florida that likes to take your calls. 888-441-4623. We connect with a South Florida sports fan because we are South Florida. Locally owned and operated. 888-441-4623. OnSideRadio.com. South Florida's home for real sports talk.
For over 20 years, Mr. Glass has been committed to the safety and satisfaction of our clients. Our products are the culmination of innovative engineering, aesthetic appeal, and the highest levels of quality. Through our legacy, Mr. Glass strives to impart the true meaning of quality, service, and sustainability to new generations. Reputation, experience, and trust is why clients choose Mr. Glass. Live the future now. Locate a dealer near you today.
He has an overbite that makes him look like a cartoon character, a slightly crooked eye, and an uncommonly wrinkly neck. In the right light, he can look a little like a garden gnome, and he'll wear a bow tie just because. Sure, you might call him a little quirky, but that's exactly what makes him so perfect. Tuna is a 3-year-old Chihuahua Dachshund mix with more than 700,000 followers on Instagram, and it all started because he was adopted. You can't buy a best friend like Tuna, but you can adopt one. Help us save them all at bestfriends.org.
Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
All right, welcome back to Inside the Paint here on OnSideRadio.com, sponsored by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. More on them a little bit later. We appreciate them jumping on board with us so that Ira and I could expand to an hour every Monday, 10 to 11 a.m. Don't know where you're catching this, but we are on all the podcast apps as well, and I'll be tweeting that out from all of our accounts. All right, let's get to last night a little bit, but I want to focus on one specific thing. Jimmy Butler proved last year during the finals that he can essentially go toe-to-toe with the best player in the world and at times beat that player. Completely overmatched in terms of the rest of the roster, as we know. No Dragic, Bam. I mean, essentially non-factors in the finals. And yet Jimmy, almost by himself, took them 6.
Right.
So the question is this. When you see last night, and you see not only the 20 points, which we anticipate didn't have huge rebound and assist numbers, but the steals, the blocks,
Filled all the boxes.
Filled the box
nicely.
score and just essentially locking down C.J. McCollum. I mean, he decided, I told the story on Five on the Floor last night that this all goes back to apparently a Minnesota analyst or play-by-play guy, one of their two people that broadcast the games, saying at one point that CJ was better than Jimmy, and Jimmy has never forgotten this. And so now we're like 4 years later, and this is the way Jimmy's mind works, where he wanted after the game last night to go after DJJ playfully. That's who he is. But I will ask this. For all of the concerns about this team, and you and I have talked about how they're up and down, and maybe this is all they are, and offensively they struggle at times to score unless Duncan and Tyler are really hot. But isn't it the case that every team in the Eastern Conference will be afraid of dealing with playoff Jimmy Butler?
Yes, except for the one I always come back to. And that's the fact of the Nets can simply outraise the scoring level because Jimmy can only choose to lock down one person. Mm-hmm. Now, I know last night you can make the argument that Trevor Ariza, what he did on Dame Lillard, that they have multiple defenders right now. But that's the difference, is that Jimmy can sick himself on one person, which often, whether he wants to humiliate Ben Simmons, like he typically does, he can do that.
Or T.J. Warren.
Whether he wants to pick on someone from the Bucks and take a guy out of the game so that he could focus on Giannis, he could do that also. But he can't do that on the Nets because he can't guard Kyrie and guard Harden and guard Durant. That's the problem, not only for the Heat, but for every team. So I think that's where it limits the Heat. I think there's that one rock at the end. And that's why, and to go back to our first segment, and the people I'm talking to also about Victor was, how far are the Heat really going this season as far as pushing your cards all in? In other words, when you're on the very precipice of a championship, even as a player, you risk that injury. You say, screw it. We are just everything in the middle of the table. We're going all in. And they'll never tell you this to your face and never tell it in the locker room, and the coaching staff will fight it at every last thing. Mm-hmm. But do you think the basketball minds and genius of Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg and Adam Simon and Chet Kammerer and Nick Garrison and take it down there, if you were to put them on a lie detector test here and ask them, do you believe your team is a championship contender this season? Ethan, what do you think they would say on the lie detector?
I think they would say no.
They would say no.
And I think they were all pointing to this whole thing of Goran, Bam, and Jimmy, but I think now that we'll talk about Goran in the next segment, but now we've seen that Goran's decline is a thing. I don't even think they can point to that now, which is why the Vic thing was so important, okay, and why they had to make that move. I think to at least, to a certain degree, keep the flexibility, but in a certain degree, keep the perception that they're still trying to contend this year, even though I think you and I both agree.
There's a different reality.
It's a different reality, okay? And I also think there is value to getting some of their young guys more playoff reps. So even to me, getting to the second round and having Bam have to do it again and having Hero and Robinson.
Is huge for this team for this reason. It not only would validate this season, it would validate last season.
Right.
It would take you out of the fluke talk going forward, so people wouldn't go that your championship or Eastern Conference title was a one-off. That's important to them. They know because of the play-in, you better finish top 6, of which is still kind of tenuous.
Well, Boston's playing better.
Boston is going to find a way when Jason Tatum scores 50 points in a game. Charlotte still finds a way, and God bless them, and I think James Borrego's a better coach than I maybe thought he was.
And let's be honest, Atlanta has been competent since
Nate took over. And Atlanta's found a way since they've been not competent. They've been one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference outside of the Elite Three. So I think it's important for the Heat to make a push just to get to at least 6, preferably 4 or 5, get you into the second round. You fight the good fight against the Sixers, against the Bucks, against the Nets, and you say, hey, we fought the good fights. They keep contending that no one's had it worse than them with COVID, which is BS, because Toronto has had it 10 times
Toronto wasn't
worse.
Even playing in its own country.
They weren't playing in their home city. They lost guys forever. They had more games than the Heat with no one anyway. So I just think it's important for the Heat just to make a competitive run and then regroup as next year, the final guaranteed year, as of now, on Jimmy Butler's contract. He has a player option after that. See where they stand, reload with one more, maybe reload with Vic. So I think when you sort of look at where the Heat are right now, I think it's more of a case of accepting the reality that they could fight the good fight, but not being championship contenders. They've seen what that looks like. They've seen in the game against Phoenix and how good Phoenix is this year. They're going to see them tomorrow. They'll see it on Denver.
They saw it against Utah.
Yeah, they saw it against Utah, even though they played so well in the home game there.
Right.
They're going to face Denver on Wednesday. It's just a different level and a different depth of talent. They know they need that third guy. Third guy healthy, Vic. Third guy healthy are $25 million. They're $25 million in cap space, but they still need that one more. Jimmy is, it's tough because we always talk about max players and then anyone gets a max contract when it's their time. So we talk about Jimmy's the level between star and superstar. Just a little bit shy of the superstars if we're going to limit that class to like 5 guys. But Jimmy in the motivated moment. Matter of fact, I'll create a new subclass for you now. The motivated star. Jimmy Butler, when he has that look, when he has crazy man look, I think he's more dangerous than Giannis, who can be too passive.
Yeah.
I think he's more dangerous than Paul George, who mentally might not have the wherewithal to get his team.
I think then you're putting Jimmy and Dame in that category. I think there are others who maybe you have kind of in that, people have in the sort of that 8 through 15 category.
Dame because of the streakiness, Jimmy because it's hard to have that ultimate level 10 all the time that he can still show you at least half the time and maybe 3/4 of the time. So Jimmy is going to be this team's alpha, no matter how it's constructed.
Right.
I think Vic understood that when he came in here, maybe because of his injuries. He was fine sort of being a beta guy. Bam has been that for the get-go with his team, deferring to Jimmy while still having his moments. So I think the other problem is this, Ethan, when you talked about how good Jimmy was last night, how good he's been in all the victories, how the record is far superior when he plays. Could Jimmy ever deal with a better player being a leading man on this team and still be the same Jimmy
Only
Butler?
if it's Bam.
Insider, but not outsider.
Yes, I think at this point it has to be Bam. I think, his respect for Bam, and look, let's be honest, Jimmy propped Bam up. From the very minute he got here, he's the best player on the team. He's the guy. Jimmy did that, okay? Because I think, as you and I both know, Bam's nature is to be a little bit more modest, a little bit more humble, a little bit more deferential, okay? And he's had to push Bam into that to the point that I don't see any way that Jimmy would be upset if it actually happened. Now, Vic is a little bit of a tougher sell with Jimmy, and that's something we didn't really get into in the first segment, but I wanted to, which is that this was not Jimmy's first choice, okay, as the third piece. I mean, we know it was Kyle Lowry or others or Drew in the offseason.
But even if Jimmy got Kyle like he wanted to get here at the trade deadline, he knew they were getting 35-year-old Kyle Lowry, and no one was going to assume that Kyle was the ultimate alpha when 31-year-old Jimmy was here, which leads me real quick to this question, and I don't think your side of it at 5 Reasons has gone as deep in as other people. And again, I don't even know the source of this because I didn't recognize the name of the person. The whole Kawhi Leonard thing.
Yeah, we haven't done a lot on that.
Random person X, who I'm sure I'm viewed nationally as, people know who you are, but random person X brings this up, and people give it legs because they have to. And the question I have is this. Kawhi Leonard is the kind of player you have to kowtow and cater to.
Yes.
I mean, he still might want to live in San Diego and commute to practice.
It's like I talked about, is his people. That was a big issue.
So is Jimmy going to suffer that? Is he going to deal with someone like that if you try to? Maybe it's there. Maybe the speculation turns in the right place. See, that's the kind of thing I think would be a difficult thing for Jimmy.
Oh, I
to
agree.
bring in another guy and to make him your catered to and kowtow and cower to guy. That's why it's so delicate when we talk about if they don't bring Vic back, and I'll throw out $23 million. I think that's fair with what you're going to bring Duncan back for, and cap holds, and bring in a different $23 million player. It's got to be the right player.
Yep.
Because you got to keep King Jimmy happy. He wasn't happy at the end in Chicago with Fred Hoiberg. He was never happy, even with his hand-selected coach in Minnesota, with Karl Anthony Towns and his softness. He was not happy with Embiid and Simmons in Philadelphia, having to play almost a third wheel. So that's a really delicate dance you're doing, because Jimmy is a fantastic player and I'll give Jimmy another vocabulary word here, a persnickety personality.
He's mercurial. I think the word is mercurial. I think you see with Jimmy, like literally, if you tell Jimmy he's a great player, he'll tell you he's not.
Right.
If you tell him he's not one of the 5 best players in the world, he'll say he's the best, that there's nobody better than him. He's just contrary. It's like, it's the way he is. His post-game, literally, they got blown out one night, and he talked about how they were much better than this, and they would be better. And then the next night they won, and he's like, we're not good enough.
Yes.
That's who he is, okay? you have to be a certain personality, but the reality is Spoelstra's a little like that too, and that's one of the reasons that this thing has worked so well. I think the trust from Jimmy to Spo would help this situation because he's never had a coach he's trusted. Even Tibbs, he's never had a coach he's trusted quite this much.
Because Eric will never criticize publicly.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
Eric criticizes collectively, praises individually. He's always done that. That's, Pat, as you know, we should tell Pat stories on that because, as you know, that's not the way that Pat always did things.
Especially behind the scenes and wanting to get stuff out.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Kai's going to be back here at 11 o'clock, so join Kai for Kai's Corner here typically from 10 to 12 every day. We got another 25 minutes here of Inside the Paint on OnSideRadio.com, sponsored by Pallet Rack City.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
There are those who dedicate themselves to a sense of honor, to a life of courage, and a commitment to something greater than themselves. They have always defended this nation and each other. They still do. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Inter Miami CF fans, join us at our new home this season for all away games as we broadcast live at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company, 1901 North Federal Highway in Pompano Beach. Join Big O and Alex Dono for the live pregame, halftime, and postgame shows while we watch the games. Enjoy meticulously brewed beer on site, delicious artisanal pizzas, live music, and giveaways. So, the new home for all Inter Miami road games is at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company at the Pompano City Mall, where they'll feature all the Inter Miami games. Follow them on Twitter at Dangerous Minds B and Facebook and Instagram at Dangerous Minds Brewing, and visit them at dangerousmindsbrewing.com.
Start your morning every morning at 8 a.m. with 4th and 20 with Toast and Marsh. The boys cover all the local sports stories while providing some great Miami Hurricanes insight. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. 4th and 20, 8 to 10 a.m. only at OnSideRadio.com.
A message to help keep you safe. If doctors told us today that we'd made a breakthrough on COVID-19, saving thousands of lives, we would rejoice. Finally, a good news day. We'd feel less afraid that our loved ones would be struck by the invisible enemy. We'd start to feel hope that we could live our lives again. Well, a mask does all that. We can help protect others by covering our noses and mouths, which is how the virus mainly spreads. Masks are a ticket to freedom, to be out in the world, to getting together, back to work, back to doing what we want. If doctors announced we could save lives today, we would grab that breakthrough with both hands. While we wait for a vaccine, grab the breakthrough that's already here. When we're out, it's masks on.
Brought to you by the Ad Council. Every 2 minutes, a woman in the U.S. is diagnosed with breast cancer. And in that split second, her life changes forever. The toll of breast cancer is great. The need to support those who are battling the disease today is even greater. We're fighting